This is the first Photoshop assignment. This is called Filter Fun. We're going to learn some basics about Photoshop, learn how to navigate around an image that we've brought into Photoshop, learn a little bit about rulers and guides, cropping photos, and adding filters, which we'll talk about more in a second. Now, the first thing that you should know is that the way that your tools are set up can be different. So you might be, even as you open up Photoshop, notice that your tools are set up differently. You might not have layers at the bottom. It might not be color or swatches here at the top. These are called workspaces, and the quickest way to get to them is across the top here, where you can see Essentials, Design, Painting. These are different setups for different things that you can do in Photoshop. If you're doing photography or 3D or motion, usually the best tools for that job will be available in that workspace. I prefer Essentials because it's set up a lot like the earlier Photoshops, and if for any reason something you do in Photoshop gets moved, so if I take this layer and I accidentally escape out of it, or I remove tool boxes or palettes that I need, the best way to get back to that is just to click on this double triangle right here, and you can choose Reset, and whatever one you have chosen, mine is Reset Essentials. By clicking on that, it'll take me back to the default for Essentials, and so you can always get back to a state where you can find the tools that you need. I will begin. I need to find the tiger.psd file inside of my shared folder. Now I'll come here and go to that. So I went to File, Open, and I will go to My Computer, Shared, Shared again, and sorry this process is a little long, D. Jensen, and then this class is Digital Media 1. We're in the Photoshop unit, and this is day 1. So you'll see a little blue file here. This is a PSD, or Photoshop document file. These are the default files for Photoshop. I'll double click on that to open that one. And I have this tiger. Now, right now, the tiger looks really small in my screen. An important thing to remember in Photoshop is that the size that you're looking at the image is not the actual size. It can be really small in real life, and you can be zoomed in really close in Photoshop, or vice versa. So right now, I'm going to teach you the first quick key. So if I want to zoom in on my image, and that is just basically bringing my face closer to the image. I'm not changing the image itself, I'm only changing my view of it. I can do it two different ways. The first way, this is a quick key. If I hold down Control and Spacebar, you can see that my cursor has turned into a zoom tool, which is the magnifying glass with the plus sign in it. And now if I click, or if I draw a box, it'll zoom in on that image. And now the opposite, to zoom back out, is Alt and Spacebar. So if I press both of those, then my tool becomes the zoom out tool, and I can just click. And these are called quick keys because no matter what tool I am in, doing that, Control and Spacebar and Alt and Spacebar will change to the zoom key. And so it can move very quickly between those different keys. I can also hold down the Alt key and then roll the mouse wheel in and out. That's another way to zoom in and out, and it'll zoom in the direction of wherever you are pointing with your cursor. So those are two different techniques, and those are very valuable things to learn. You'll need to use that a lot. The other navigation tool that is helpful is that when I'm zoomed in, if I want to move around my image, it's kind of hard to come down to these bars and to slide them. And so if I hold down the space bar, that is a quick key that changes whatever tool I have to the hand tool. And now with the hand tool, I'm still holding down spacebar. As I click, I can drag to different places on the image. So I can very quickly navigate around the scene using those three quick keys. Zoom in, which is Control and Spacebar. Zoom out, which is Alt and Spacebar. And the hand tool, which is just Spacebar. And you also always have to click with that. Now if I want to temporarily remove all of the palettes and toolbars to see my image better, I can always press Tab and do that. It's not working right here because Tab does something with the screencast software I'm using, so just try that. And now I want to mess with the rulers. So you should see a little white bar across the top and the side. If you don't, Control R is the quick key for that. So if I press Control R, you can see that turning on and off, and this is a ruler that'll help me know the actual size of this image. We'll discuss resolution and other things later. Right now I can see that this tiger is just a little over 4 inches by a little bit over 4 inches. So I want to crop that down to be exactly 4 by 4 inches. And the crop tool is this one over here in your toolbar. It's the fifth one down. The quick key for it is C, so if I'm on another tool and I press C, it'll automatically be the crop tool. And I want to make sure in this case that my width and my height dimensions are empty. I can put in a specific measurement that I want, so I can put in 4 inches by 4 inches, and then whatever box I draw will automatically be that. But in this case, I just want it to be empty. So make sure your width, height, and resolution are empty, and then we're going to drag a box. And I started above, outside of the stage, out here into the gray. The artboard is what we call that, and it's just a place where we can do things without affecting the image. And when I start clicking, you can see little ants marching, a little white dotted line that is moving to help you see it better. And I can now use my rulers to make sure that this is exactly 4 by 4 inches. And if it's hard to tell that you're right at 4 inches, the easiest way to do that is if I hold down my mouse on the ruler and I drag down, I can drag down what's called a guideline. And this is a bright blue line that won't show up when you print. It's only there to help you to measure things and to make sure that everything is lined up and equal. So if I put them close there, and then I can zoom in with Control and Spacebar and make sure that my crop is right on. And you'll see with the crop tool that everything that's going to be removed, everything that's outside of that box I drew, is dark. It's been darkened, and that means that that'll disappear when I OK the crop. And I can do that by pressing Enter. So now my tiger should be exactly 4 inches by 4 inches. Now I'm going to add a grid. And the grid isn't always very useful in this class, but you may find instances when you'll need it. And the way that we get to the grid is by going to Edit, Preferences, and then we'll choose Guides. And you might not be able to see that, but even if I click on General, when my preferences come up here, I can choose Guides, Grid, and Slices here, and I can specify for my grid what I want. And I want for my grid a green line. I want it to be in a line style, and I want a grid line every 2 inches and subdivided twice, which means I'll have a grid of 1 by 1 inch boxes all the way around this tiger. So I set green, 2 and 2, and when I press OK, I can't see anything. If you can't see your grid, the reason for that is because it hasn't been turned on. And the way that you do that is by holding down Control and then hitting the quotation mark. And the quotation mark is the key on your keyboard just to the left of the Enter. But now you should see that I have a tiger that has 4 grids across and 4 grids down. And I've done that to make it easier for me to be able to section it off. And that grid will also not show up if I print. I can turn it off by hitting Control and quotation mark again. It's just there to be used as a reference. Now, in Photoshop, we can specify the areas that we want to change. And we'll be doing this throughout the Photoshop unit. There's a lot of different methods. Today we are going to use just a square selection tool. And a selection in Photoshop is called a marquee, M-A-R-Q-U-E-E. And we'll see the very first selection option is this second tool down. It's called the rectangular marquee tool. The quick key for it is M. And now I can draw boxes. And these boxes are marquees, they're selections. I'm telling Photoshop that whatever I want done inside of that. And sometimes you'll see this on the internet called ants marching because it looks like a little black and white dotted line going and moving. That's to make it easier to see. Now if I've drawn a marquee and I don't want it, I can deselect it by pressing Control D. And this is a very useful tool because about 95% of the time if you are trying to do something in Photoshop and it won't let you, it's because of a marquee. So let me show you. I'm going to draw a little marquee here that's about a pixel by a pixel. And I'm going to zoom out. Now it's very difficult to see that I have a marquee there. And if I try to draw or do anything now with this, I can't. And the reason for that is usually because there's a marquee. It's really easy to accidentally draw a marquee, and you might not even recognize it. But Photoshop will only let you do things inside of a marquee, so I can only actually color in that little pixel there. And so if you ever get to the point in Photoshop where nothing is working, try to deselect by pressing Control D. And that will remove all the marquees, and there's a pretty good chance that that will solve whatever problem that you're having. So I'm going to get out my marquee tool again, the rectangular marquee, and I'm going to start by selecting one of these boxes that my grid is created to draw a marquee with. So I'll start in this corner here, and I'm going to hold down my mouse and drag out a marquee that is only selecting within that first little grid box where the eye is. I can see my marquee now. And to show you how Photoshop will only affect areas that are selected, I am going to apply a filter. Now what filters are, you can see up here at the top it says filter. I'll click here and choose filter gallery. Now all of these underneath are filters, and I can even choose one of these and it'll open the filter gallery. So I'm going to choose filter and then filter gallery, and this giant box will open up. And I don't know if I can shrink this down to fit it inside of my screencast here. Here we go. Now on your left side you'll see that only the part that you had selected is currently available, and I can do the same zoom in with Control and spacebar on this and Alt and spacebar to zoom out just to see my selection area. And all of these things in the middle are different ways that Photoshop can affect this. Now if you've seen those ads where they'll take a picture and they'll make it look like it's a painting and they charge you hundreds of bucks, that's just one of these filters, and it would take you about 5 seconds to do that. You can see there are a bunch of different ones. Plastic wrap makes something look like it's covered in plastic. We have colored pencil, and moving to these on the right, if I slide these bars I can change the effect. And there's a whole bunch of different ones. I'm going to choose glowing edge because it's a very obvious one. Now when I've picked the filter that I want and I've changed it how I want it to be, the way that I select it is by pressing OK. If I hit cancel, I'll cancel out of it and go back to my regular screen without making the change. OK will go back to the image and also make the change. So now I have changed that tiger to have a filter right there on just inside of the marquee. And now I'll hit Control D to deselect, and now I'm going to do the same thing again. I'll come here, select the other eye, and then choose Filter Gallery again, and try another one. And this is what I want you to do. To get familiar with Photoshop, here's stained glass is pretty cool, and I'll change the size so it's smaller. I want you to fill all 16 of the squares with a different filter, just to get familiar with selections in Photoshop. Don't forget to Control D every time to deselect, and I want you to go through here and fill in every one of these. And experiment with the filters. They're pretty cool. They can be really useful. We don't want to just use a filter to change an image. We want to be able to have a little bit more control over it usually than that, but we can make something that looks really cool very quickly with these different filters. And so I'll do water paper here. And you can see how quickly you can change this tiger. So the first part of this lesson is to go through and to make sure that each one of those squares is filled with some kind of filter. And when you're done with that, I also want you to add text to the image. And the text is the easiest tool to remember. It's the T that's over there. They made it really easy, and I'm sure you can guess what the quick key is. It is also T, so I can either just click on the text tool or hit T. You'll see that across the top here, this little bar will always be specifically for whatever tool you're using. And right now, this font that I've never heard of before is my default font. This is the size that it's at. It's very large. I'll turn it down to 12-point font. And what I want to do, I don't want to drag a text box. That makes things a lot more difficult. I always want to just click. So I'll click here, and then I'll start typing. So I'll say Mr. Jensen, second period. Now there's a couple of things that we can do with text. The first one is we can change where it is. We can move that text by selecting the Move tool that's up here, the very first tool in the toolbox. And the quick key for that is V, so that one's a little harder to remember. But the Move tool will allow me to take things that are on their own layer, like this text box is, and we'll talk about layers more next time, and adjust this to wherever I want it to go. So I can move it over to this corner. Now right now, that text, let's say that isn't the text that I want. If I want to change the font or the size, I have to use the text tool and then select it like I was in Word. So I can click in that text box again and then highlight it like I wanted to make something bold in Word. Now I can change the size Here with the point size, I can make it bold or whatever options are available in that font, and I can even change the font right here. And then go back to my Move tool and adjust it again. And so when you finish all 16 filters, I want you to hit T for text, click onto the tiger, and write your name and what period it is on here. And then you can save this file. So the last thing we want to talk about is saving. Now, we want to save two different kinds of files whenever we work in Photoshop. I'll go to File and choose Save As. The first file is a PSD file. So this tiger was already a PSD file, so if you go to your H drive, which is your drive, and looks like mine might not be working. So I'm just going to save to the desktop for now. So I can save this tiger, and if I save this Photoshop file, it'll keep my text separated, it'll keep all of the changes that I've made, and it'll allow me to come back and make corrections or changes later. So I always want to keep a Photoshop file, because you never know when you're going to need one of these files again. So I'll go ahead and save tiger.psd. It'll ask, do you want to maximize compatibility? That's just so it'll work with earlier versions of Photoshop. That's great. Don't worry about it, just press OK. But I also want to save an image file. If I send this PSD file to most people, they won't be able to open it. A PSD file will only work in Photoshop, and most people don't have Photoshop. And if you saved a PSD file to the internet, it wouldn't work. So I have to prepare this file to be something that anybody can see. And the most common kind of image file that we work with is a JPEG. And I'll come back here to File and choose Save As again. And under Format, you can see there are a bunch of different image formats. Now, you don't have to worry about most of these. We'll use, for the most part, in this unit, just the JPEG. Not the JPEG 2000, but just the regular JPEG. And I'll click on that, tiger.jpg, and I'll make sure that it's got the class period first initial, last name, so that you can turn it into me. So now that I will say Save, it'll ask me my JPEG options, and I want to make sure that I've slid this slider all the way to the biggest possible quality, which is 12. When I click OK now, you should see right there is, we'll move these other ones out of the way here, and you can see T. Jensen Tiger right there. If I double click on it, it's an image that that Windows even recognizes. So Windows will just open a JPEG. If I put this on the internet, anybody will be able to click on it and recognize it. Most of the files that you see that are images will be JPEGs. So remember, save a Photoshop file and save a JPEG file. And the JPEG is going to be the one that you turn into me for most of the assignments in this class.